Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here in the sports entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. Here on PRConnectionRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And while the Vegas Golden Knights, the season is going on, there's been some wins, been some losses, ups and downs. It's always a good idea to look at the rest of the NHL. And more importantly, I find it intriguing to look at former coaches of the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, we have done an episode before here on Vegas Hockey Hub talking about former Golden Knight Pete DeBoer and how he's performing in Dallas. Turns out the best record in the Western Conference, Pete DeBoer. He's doing pretty well. So, on the opposite effect, how about we look at the first head coach in Vegas Golden Knights history? How about we go over the New York Rangers and how they are performing under ex-Golden Knight Gerard Gallant? So to give you some context, I'm actually going to go over Gerard Gallant and what he has done up to this point. Because Gerard Gallant, he spent a few seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights. He was part of the Golden Knights organization from day one, and then he got fired midway through 2019-2020. But before that, Gerard Gallant had a fascinating career, not just as a coach, but as a player. This is the same Gerard Gallant who got drafted by Detroit in the 1981 NHL draft. It's also the same Gerard Gallant that throughout his playing career actually played over 600 NHL games with the Detroit Red Wings, and he had a cup of coffee with the Tampa Bay Lightning towards the end of his professional hockey career. But for someone like Gerard Gallant to have 600 games of NHL experience, over 1,600 penalty minutes as a NHLer. As a matter of fact, there was one season where Gerard Gallant accumulated 250 penalty minutes in a single season. So if you just based off of that, you might think that he was just a gritty player, that he was a grinder, he was an enforcer. But in actuality, he had 211 goals, 480 points in 600 games. This is the same Gerard Gallant that in a single season had 93 points in 88-89. So not only was he a point scorer, but he was an enforcer as well. It's also the same Gerard Gallant that had over 50 playoff games in his career as a NHLer. But everything can't last forever. So after the 1995 season, after a 14-year career as a NHLer, he eventually hung up his skates and he eventually became a head coach. So he became a head coach and he was part of the assistant in the AHL for a little while. He was an assistant coach for the Fort Wayne Komets, an assistant coach for the Louisville Panthers. However, his first tenure with the NHL came with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So the Columbus Blue Jackets, he was an assistant coach for them for a couple of seasons. He was a head coach and an assistant coach, and he was also somebody who was an assistant coach for 4 seasons and then became a head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets in the mid-2000s. And his first taste as a NHL head coach, he had 3 seasons in Columbus, went 56, 76, and 4 as a NHL coach. His first tenure there, he missed the playoffs all 3 years. He was the head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. But you know what? That's fine. You know, it's your first tenure, your first run as an NHL head coach. You're going to be okay. So he gets fired, replaced by Ken Hitchcock. He then becomes an assistant coach for Team Canada. He becomes an assistant coach for the New York Islanders. I mean, this is someone that, had to go back to being an assistant coach, but still a very accomplished assistant coach with the Team Canada and with the Islanders. Well, then he gets his second chance. And in 2014, almost 9 years later from when he was a NHL head coach, he becomes the head coach of the Florida Panthers. He gets hired by Dale Talon, who was a mastermind of the Chicago Blackhawks during their Stanley Cup run. And he spends 3 years in Florida. I also want to keep in mind this is the same Florida Panthers team that around this point you had Roberto Luongo as their goaltender. In year one, they go 38, 29, and 15. They missed the playoffs in his first year. So 4 years in, he has not made the playoffs as a coach. And then 2015, 2016, his second year in Florida, they go 47, 26, and 9. They win their division in the Atlantic, but lose in the first round to the New York Islanders, a team he used to be an assistant coach for. So after year two in Florida, you have Roberto Luongo. Now, offseason, they signed some guy named Jonathan Marchessault. He'll be important later. And they have Riley Smith, who they got from the Boston Bruins in a trade involving Mark Savard and his contract. So you have Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, Aaron Ekblad, Roberto Luongo. There is some good talent in Florida, but after 22 games in 2016, 2017, after a 11-10-1 record, the Florida Panthers fire Gerard Gallant, and he actually has to be fired and go home on a taxi. In fact, there's a kind of a viral photo of him having to depart on a taxi and a picture of him actually trying to hail a cab after being fired from Florida. So he gets fired. They fire the general manager. They fire him. They start anew in Florida. Well, not even half a year later, he gets announced as the head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. And now I'm going to kind of simplify this for a half-hour show, but for the Vegas Golden Knights, he was the perfect coach for year one. This was a Gerard Gallant who was able to lead them in the right way. I mean, keep in mind, Gerard Gallant is a gritty guy. Go back to what he did as a player. Gerard Gallant liked to have some physicality, some tough players on their bottom six, and he did that with the Vegas Golden Knights. You had players like Ryan Reeves, for example. He'll be brought back up later as someone who could bring some intensity to that bottom six. You have someone like William Carrier, who can bring some intensity to the bottom six. It's just the fact that Gerard Gallant, he had some gritty guys in Vegas. And he also had some good goal scorers, just like his former Florida Panthers counterparts in Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith. Bringing those two over from Florida to Vegas to be with Gerard Gallant again was a fantastic move in hindsight. He also had a fantastic Hall of Fame goalie in Marc-Andre Fleury. So for the second straight team, he has an excellent goalie, some solid defenders that are shot blockers like Braden McNabb, Nate Schmidt, just like you had Keith Yandel and Aaron Ekblad out there in Florida. And then on the offense, you had some goal scorers on the top six and gritty enforcers, some intensity, and some tough players on the bottom six. So year one, they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. They lose to the Washington Capitals in year one of the Vegas Golden Knights. We talked about this very much here on this show on Vegas Hockey Hub. And this is someone who won the Jack Adams Award as the coach of the year and was actually the All-Star Game coach for the Vegas Golden Knights. In 2018, he was the coach of the Pacific. So year two, 2018, 2019, a year that kind of gets forgotten in the shuffle, kind of led to the decline of what happens the next year. So they go 43, 32, and 7. That would be around the 6th seed in the West if they did 1-8. So they finished behind San Jose. They finished behind, I believe, Calgary. And they lose in the first round to the San Jose Sharks. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. They lost in 7 games, but they were up 3-1 in the series. All right, we can revisit and we could talk about, the 5-minute major. We could discuss, game 6, Marc-Andre Fleury letting up that goal in overtime. Look, with everything that happened in the San Jose series, a lot of the blame could actually be put on Gerard Gallant itself and the way that they played against San Jose, and the fact that it felt like the pedal was kind of taken off in Game 5 and Game 6, and they weren't able to recover in Game 7. So after a very bad loss in year 2 with the Vegas Golden Knights, year 3 is where everything fell apart for Gerard Gallant. Not only did you have some injuries that affected the Vegas Golden Knights throughout the year, but Marc-Andre Fleury showed signs of regression. As a matter of fact, Marc-Andre Fleury was, hey, they had to bring in Robin Leonard that year to kind of add some help for Robin Leonard and Marc-Andre Fleury, because Fleury unfortunately had regressed a bit in that year. It really felt like when it came to Marc-Andre Fleury in that 2019-2020 season that he was showing some signs of decline. You also had the defense, where unfortunately the defense didn't look as strong as they did in year 1 and in year 2. You had some young guys that eventually were called up, and it really messed with the chemistry there. Also, your bottom 6, you had Ryan Reeves, you had William Carrier, but you had lost some intensity on the bottom 6. And on the top 6, you lost James Neal, you lost David Perron, Eric Holla, he was shipped out. He was no longer there anymore. They had brought in Mark Stone. You had brought in Max Pacioretty, Paul Stastny. So there were some good veterans on the top 6, but it just didn't feel the same. It didn't look right from a Vegas Golden Knights perspective. And also, one of the biggest concerns and one of the biggest question marks that Gerard Gallant has had throughout his coaching career is that his scheme tends to get predictable as his time goes on. That he doesn't really change up the lines as much throughout his tenure as a head coach. From year 1 to year 2 to year 3, it's always really felt like Gerard Gallant doesn't do enough to change and to kind of, evolve his scheme and his strategies and the way that he actually plays the game as a coach. When it comes to the top 6 and the bottom 6, Gerard Gallant, it really feels like as a head coach, and especially with New York, which we're going to talk about later in the show, it's always seemed like Gerard Gallant, once he has a system in place, once he has a certain strategy and a certain way he wants to build the lineup, he doesn't do enough to change it constantly throughout the year. Unless injuries majorly affect it, it just seems like he keeps certain guys at a certain line throughout the entire year. And for anyone who has watched hockey long enough, you will know that you sometimes need to change the lines throughout the year in order to not make yourself become predictable, not to become stale. And that's really been the major fault that Gerard Gallant has had. There's also been the fact that there has been certain players under Gerard Gallant that have even come out and said that he will stall their progress, and they actually didn't mesh well with a Gerard Gallant system. We're seeing that right now with Alexis Lafreniere. I mean, this is a guy who is a number 1 overall pick with the New York Rangers, and he just doesn't seem like he fits into the mold that Gerard Gallant has in terms of lineup construction for the New York Rangers. He doesn't really fit in that system. So once again, what is something that Gerard Gallant has really looked out for? What is something that Gerard Gallant does in terms of scheme and in terms of system? Well, once again, he is somebody that in terms of top 6 is very heavy on getting that puck into the back of the net. He is very persistent on getting down to the net as quick as possible to get down there and bring pressure in terms of offense. And then on the bottom 6, having some tough, gritty guys that are able to crash the boards, be able to somebody that can break up the momentum, someone who can kind of change the momentum of the game on that bottom 6. We saw that in Florida, Vegas, and now in New York. And then defensive, once again, this is someone who has, in terms of shot blocking, in terms of having defensemen that will stand in front of the net, protect the goalie. That's something that Gerard Gallant's system does a lot, and especially with New York. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And then lastly, having a good to great goalie in net has something that's kind of always benefited Gerard Gallant throughout his tenure as a NHL head coach. In Florida with Luongo, in Vegas with Fleury, and now with the New York Rangers with Igor. So, talking about the New York Rangers. So, how have the New York Rangers done with Gerard Gallant? How have they done since they named him head coach in June of 2021? So, not only, by the way, did he become head coach of Team Canada for the 2021 International Ice Hockey Federation World Championship, the team that won a gold medal, by the way, beat Finland and won their World Championship in 2021. That's something I just kind of wanted to briefly mention. But in June of 2021, Gerard Gallant became the head coach of the New York Rangers. And year one was phenomenal for New York. All right, 52, 24, and 6. Second best record in the Metro. They had 110 points on the year. And when it came to New York, they were running on all cylinders. This was a team that showed a lot of confidence early in the year. And when they got to the postseason, it really felt like this was a team that was destined to go far. So they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in 7 games in the first round. They move on to the second round in 7 games, beat Carolina, who was actually better than them in the regular season, but then lose to the back-to-back Stanley Cup champion, Tampa Bay Lightning, in 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. So you could consider that a building block for the New York Rangers. You know, that's something that you could classify and say, you know what, that 2021-2022 season, 52 wins, 110 points, and an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, we're going to build off of that. We are going to focus on building off of the success off of what we did the year before. So what did the New York Rangers do after this season? How did they build off of that heading into the 2022 off season for New York? Well, here's exactly what they did. The New York Rangers, heading off of that Eastern Conference Finals season, not only did they name a captain in Jacob Trouba, who became the first captain since Ryan McDonough, so replacing Ryan McDonough as the captain. There's also the same New York Rangers at that same offseason. They went in and they made some personnel changes. There was the fact that they brought in Ryan Carpenter, a former Vegas Golden Knight with Gerard Gallant. They brought him in to be on the bottom 6 and has actually been part of the AHL at times this year. They also assigned Jaroslav Halak to be a backup goaltender in the NHL. I mean, Halak has been a long-time stalwart of the NHL and is someone who has been very reliable when it comes to the NHL. So bringing him in from Vancouver, that was a good move for them. They also ended up making some moves as well when it came to bringing Vincent Trocheck over for the New York Rangers. This was a situation where he signed a 7-year deal to be part of the top 6 with the New York Rangers. And lastly, one of the key moves that they made was bringing over former Hobey Baker Award winner Jimmy Vesey. I mean, this was someone who agreed on a 1-year deal. He signed with them. Then he signed a contract extension at some point during the season as well. But this was Jimmy Vesey, who after the second tenure with New York gets brought back and is supposed to be with Gerard Gallant. So you still have Mika Zibanejad. Jacob Trouba is your captain. Igor Shesterkin just came off of Vezina, has been one of your best players. You also have Artemi Panarin, the bread man, as your face of the franchise. K'Andre Miller has progressed a lot as a defenseman. Ryan Lindgren has become a solid defenseman for the New York Rangers. Chris Kreider, he is getting better and better as a veteran for the New York Rangers. Capo Caco, 21 years old, still shows potential. And then you have Adam Fox, who is undoubtedly one of the best defensemen in the NHL as your top line and as a New York native, as kind of someone who's a local hero in New York. So this is a New York Rangers team that looked like everything was going right for them. I also want to mention certain accolades that have taken place this season. Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider getting to 700 games in their NHL career. And for Chris Kreider, that is exceptional considering that they have done it his entire career with the New York Rangers. So for him to play that many games as a NHLer and all of them with the New York Rangers is impressive. Artemi Panarin also having 600 points, and that 600 point being as a New York Ranger, that has gone a long way. This is also the same New York Rangers team that decided to get rid of somebody. Now, I mentioned that I was going to get back to Ryan Reaves later in the show. Well, the New York Rangers brought in Ryan Reaves from the first year Gerard Gallant was here. Gerard Gallant brought over Ryan Reaves from the Vegas Golden Knights. They traded to get Ryan Reaves. Well, not even 1 year later, the New York Rangers trade Ryan Reaves to the Minnesota Wild to get a draft pick in return. So Ryan Reaves, who is an enforcer, who is somebody that is a good player to have on your bottom six, if you want that physicality, that toughness, they trade him away. And that's actually one of the first ways I look at it. And I say, you know what? The New York Rangers, surprisingly, are not keeping with this kind of same formula they did the year before. There is some schemes that are kind of changing with the New York Rangers. He's not doing the same old they did the year before. And the only way you have to examine that and actually determine it is based off of what their lineup is right now. I mean, Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, and Jimmy Vesey is your top line for the New York Rangers. This is still a 50-point Panarin, a near 50-point Zibanejad, and Jimmy Vesey, 9 goals on the year, most likely going to get to around 15 by the year's end. This is someone who, by the way, has never had more than 20 goals in a single season. So having him on the first line with Zibanejad, with Panarin, has been a solid move for the New York Rangers. That second line with Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck, and Barclay Goodrow has been solid and consistent as well for New York. I mean, Trocheck has been worth every penny of that contract so far in year one. He has had 14 goals, around 40 points in around 50 games. Chris Kreider, taking a little step back from a year before, but still a 20-goal scorer with the New York Rangers. And Barclay Goodrow, around 25 points from what he has done in his career. I also want to mention the young bottom six that Gerard Gallant has in New York. It is a little bit of a difference from what he did in Vegas. It is a bit different from what he has done in other places in his career. As a matter of fact, there really isn't anyone on the bottom six that I would say are that physical, gritty guys that you normally see on a Gerard Gallant bottom six. I mean, you got, Will Coulier. I mean, this is a guy who, he has played a little time with the Hartford Wolfpack, 14 goals, 21 points in Hartford, has gotten called up to the NHL. I mean, this is somebody that is only at a young age with the New York Rangers, 21 years old, former second round pick with the New York Rangers. They're looking to see a lot of potential in him. You also have Samuel Belayeus, who is someone who was with St. Louis for a long time, now has become a guy who will get you 5 to 10 points every single year on your bottom line. You also have your defense with Ryan Lindgren and Adam Fox. I mean, Adam Fox, 10 goals, 48 points in 49 games, and a plus 23 When I say that he is one of the best defensemen in the NHL, I'm not kidding. And Ryan Lindgren, a plus 23, no goals on the year, but has around 15 points. And this is someone that the New York Rangers are going to be building off of, as both Fox and Lindgren are 24 years old. You have your captain Trouba with the young K-Andre Miller. And K-Andre Miller, 25 points on the year, the former first-round pick. He has done pretty well. And Jacob Trouba, now his stats aren't incredible, but for a captain, he brings leadership quality to New York. So as we get about 5 minutes left here in the show, I also want to mention that this is a team that, in terms of goaltending, Igor and Jaroslav, they have done solid with the New York Rangers. You know, they're not doing amazing. They're not doing great at the moment, but they're doing solid. And the New York Rangers at this point in time need solid goaltending under Gerard Gallant. So to really kind of wrap all this up and to actually break it down the right way, how are the New York Rangers performing under ex-Golden Knight Gerard Gallant? Well, all I have to do is read out the stats for yourself to point it out. The New York Rangers are currently the sixth best team in the Eastern Conference. They have the third best record in the Metro. New York Rangers are behind the New Jersey Devils and are behind the Carolina Hurricanes at this moment in time. They are right now 2 points ahead of the Washington Capitals for the seventh spot in the Eastern Conference, and they are also 5 points ahead of 8. So they have a little cushion at the moment from being, barely in the playoffs to being a 3 seed in the Metro going up against the 2 seed in New Jersey. So you have a scenario with Gerard Gallant and the New York Rangers that I will say has done pretty well in terms of how they're doing in year 2. Now, the biggest question you have to ask yourself is, will Gerard Gallant repeat what he did in Vegas? And let me explain what I mean. In year 1 of the Vegas Golden Knights, Gerard Gallant had his best performing year, getting all the way to Stanley Cup Finals, the Jack Adams Award, getting him to the third best record in the Western Conference, winning his division. He had a phenomenal year 1. Year 2, they declined just a little bit, sixth best record in the West, third best record in the Pacific, and they lose in the first round. Year 3, fired. Will Gerard Gallant repeat that same process here with the New York Rangers? Year 1 had a phenomenal year, 110 points, second best record in the Metro, and they get to Eastern Conference Finals. Well, year 2, the sixth best record in the East, third best record in the Metro. Is it possible that we're seeing deja vu? Is it possible that we are seeing the same story play out in New York? That just like Vegas, year 2, Gerard Gallant is going to lose in the first round and is going to be a 6 seed, going to be the lower seed in the playoffs going up in the first round. That's just kind of something I have to play off real quick because it is an interesting point that Gerard Gallant could be repeating what he did in Vegas like he is going to be in New York. Just an idea. So this has been another episode of Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. Follow us on social media at Vegas Hockey Hub and follow PR Connections Radio at prconnectionsradio.com. I also want to give a shout, by the way, to all the fantastic shows we have here on PR Connections Radio. I want to appreciate all the people that put excellent content on here. But until next time, this is Vegas Hockey Hub. Continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights.